the new criticism around Nolan's The Odyssey reveals something interesting. A lot of people looked at the film, did not see exactly the version they wanted, and immediately called it a complete woke disaster. Well, the film obviously can be criticized. It has problems. Some dialogues are weak. Some choices are strange. And it is not simply Homer's Odyssey placed on screen. But that does not mean there is nothing there. In fact, the film has a very clear central idea. Just as Tenet is built around entropy, Nolan's Odyssey is built around the law of Zeus. The idea is simple: treat others as you would want to be treated, because the stranger before you may be a god in disguise. So the whole story revolves around the breaking of that law. Not only the law of hospitality, but the divine and natural order itself. Odysseus wins the war, but what comes after victory is chaos, violence, disorder, pride, and the profanation of what should have remained sacred. And because he breaks that order, Odysseus loses himself. That is the first great point of the film. When man separates himself from divine law, from natural law, from the order he was called to live within, he no longer knows who he is. This is why the Calypso section matters so much. Odysseus is not only trapped on an island. He is trapped in forgetfulness. He has lost his identity, vocation, kingship, and his home. He wants to return, but his will is weak. He carries guilt, remorse, and the weight of what he has done. So the journey is not only geographical. It is moral. Odysseus has to recover who he is. And he does that through trials. His pride and need to sail in a different way of Agamemnon makes his sail as wind commands, symbolizing he is the hand of the gods now. The Cyclops, even without the famous dialogue, tests his pride and prudence to act in the right way. Laestrygonians are brute force, and remember that there is always someone stronger, unwilling to follow natural human social bonds. Circe exposes the lower appetites of men, the danger of becoming like animals when we live only for hunger, pleasure, and matter. The journey to the underworld confronts him with death, memory, guilt, and sacrifice. Odysseus has to be smart to lead his crew to avoid Charybdis and save the lives he can, and the Sirens reveal the illusion of worldly desire, the thing you think will finally satisfy you, but never can. And through all these trials, Odysseus slowly learns that he cannot save himself by control alone. That is perhaps the most important movement in the film. As Calypso said, at first, he wants to master his destiny. But he has to learn to surrender to something greater than himself. He has to stop challenging the gods and open himself to a higher order. That is why the ocean becomes so important. It is not just water. It is the place where he can no longer control everything. He has to be carried. He has to be purified. He has to be reborn. And only then can he return home. But when he returns, he does not find order. He finds weak men. The father has been absent. The king has been absent. The house has been left empty. And in that absence, disorder has entered. The suitors are not only romantic rivals. They are symbols of social decay, men without honor, without strength, without truth, without respect for the house they entered. So the return of Odysseus is the return of the father. The return of the king. The return of a man who has sinned, suffered, learned, and finally comes back to restore order. That is why the ending matters. He does not return as a perfect man. He returns as a humbled man. He returns with the help of forces greater than himself. And he restores the house not only for himself, but for the next generation, for Telemachus, the son who begins weak, but can now inherit a restored order, in an act of filiation with his father. This is where Nolan's film becomes interesting for our time. It may use modern faces, modern anxieties, and postmodern appearances. But the central movement, the story, and what makes people excited when they leave the theater is surprisingly traditional. The world falls into chaos when the father disappears because he sinned and escaped from God, when natural law is broken and weak men as Antinous fail to guard the house. and the world can be restored when the father returns, assumes his guilt, submits to a higher law, and passes order to his son. It is not a perfect adaptation of Homer. But it is not empty either. It is Nolan's Odyssey for our time, a story about all ethnicities and groups gathered in the drama of a civilization that lost itself, a man who forgot who he was, and the painful journey back to home, order, fatherhood, and transcendence.